The engine hadn't even cooled yet when I saw the red glow reflecting off my parents' front porch. A brand new Audi convertible, still with paper plates, parked proudly in our family's cracked driveway like it didn't know it didn't belong. I didn't have to ask whose it was. I already knew. Brielle twirled next to it, her white sundress catching the golden light like she was in a commercial. "Isn't she gorgeous?" she said, running her freshly manicured fingers across the hood. The salesman basically gave it to me, like fate or something. I stepped out of my car, a 10-year-old Toyota with a coffee stain on the seat and 148,000 miles on the dash. My work badge was still clipped to my blouse. My heels ached from standing 12 hours straight auditing risk portfolios, and my phone buzzed again. Another overdraft warning. "Brielle," I said, trying not to sound like I was unraveling. "Where did you get the money?" She flipped her hair, the same golden curls Mom used to say made her look like an angel. "Don't start, Aubrey. Mom and Dad helped me. Right, guys?" Behind her, my parents stood on the porch with 2 flutes of champagne. Champagne, like this was something to celebrate. Mom gave me that familiar look, the one that always meant, "Not here, not now, don't embarrass us." Sweetheart, she needed a safe car. You know how dangerous the roads are these days. I blinked. "You used the emergency fund." "It's just a car," Brielle said, rolling her eyes. "You're good with money. You'll make it back. And besides, family comes first." I pulled out my phone and held up the screen. "There's $116 left in that account. You didn't even ask." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Aubrey, your sister has interviews lined up. She needs to make a good impression." "What interviews?" I laughed, bitter and hollow. The ones after the 3 jobs she quit this year? Or the colleges she never finished? Right on cue, Brielle's eyes welled with tears. "She's being mean to me again, Mom." Mom rushed to her side, like Brielle was the one who just had her future stolen. "Aubrey," she whispered like we were in church, "you've always been the strong one." That line, that goddamn line. They said it when I paid the electric bill in college, so the house wouldn't go dark. They said it when I worked 2 jobs while Brielle figured herself out. They said it when Dad retired at 56 and forgot to tell anyone he drained his 401k. "You're right," I said softly. "I am the strong one." Mom smiled like that settled it, like I was back in my box. Predictable, reliable Aubrey. I turned away and dialed the bank. "Hi, this is Aubrey Callahan. I'd like to freeze all activity on account 4,487. Yes, immediately. And close the joint account with Margot Callahan as well." Mom's face dropped. "What are you doing?" "Protecting what's left of my life," I said. "You can't do this," she snapped, reaching for my phone. "I already did." I turned to Brielle, who looked like I'd just kicked her new car. "Enjoy it while you can," I said, "because when the loan bounces, they're going to come looking for the cosigner." Her lips parted, but nothing came out. The silence was delicious. I walked back to my car, my heartbeat thudding like a war drum. Behind me, Dad called my name. Mom yelled something about betrayal. Brielle shrieked, but I kept walking. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse on the steering wheel like some soap opera heroine. I smiled, because for the first time in a very, very long time, I wasn't the strong one anymore. I was the dangerous one. I didn't drive home. I drove straight to Logan's. His porch light was still on when I pulled into the gravel driveway. The familiar creak of the wooden step felt like stepping into an older version of myself. The version that used to believe in family, forgiveness, and fixing everything quietly. That girl was dead now. He opened the door before I knocked. "Hey," he said. "You okay?" I held up my phone, still glowing from the last transaction. "You still have that forensic accounting software?" He stepped aside, booted it up an hour ago. Figured you might call. We didn't hug. We didn't talk about what happened last time we saw each other. We just sat side by side at his dining table while the laptop screen reflected off his glasses. "Start with this one," I said, forwarding him the account numbers I'd collected over the years. Joint savings, emergency funds. The mom's card I'd kept paying off because they swore it was only for groceries. Logan's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Okay. Whoa. Okay. What?" He spun the screen toward me. A list of microtransactions popped up like a slow drip. $138 to a private tutoring service. $212 to a resort in Florida. $59 to some obscure payment processor. All from the emergency fund. I asked. He shook his head. "From your own linked checking account. They've been siphoning small amounts for years. Nothing big enough to trigger alerts, but consistent, like someone who knew exactly how to stay under radar." I swallowed hard. "And this," he clicked another tab. "That car Brielle's flaunting. You're listed as the co-signer." "I never signed anything." "You didn't need to. They used your signature from that student loan in 2008. Digitally scanned. Sloppy job, too." My chest tightened. "How much total?" I asked. He leaned back, arms crossed. "Between the fake loans, the forged cosigns, the skimmed withdrawals, we're sitting around $280,000. My hands started shaking. Not from fear. From fury. "This is theft," I said. "This is federal fraud," Logan corrected. He clicked one more button. "And this is the cherry on top." I leaned in. "They refinanced their house last month. Used your name as a secondary guarantor." "What?" "Forged. Again." I sat back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. "They used me for everything. My name, my money, my silence. And I let them. Until now." I stood up. "I'm going to the police." Logan didn't try to stop me. "I'll get the files ready." Asheville's Financial Crimes Unit sat in a quiet building behind the courthouse, a place most people didn't even realize existed. Detective Erin Sloan met me with a calm nod and eyes that had clearly seen too many broken families. "This is a lot," she said, flipping through the folders. "You're saying this has been happening for years?" I nodded, but I didn't connect the dots until tonight. "Your parents and sister, did they have access to your accounts willingly?" "Some. The rest they took without permission." She studied one forged signature closely. "This is serious fraud. Identity theft, financial abuse, co-signer manipulation. If we move forward with charges, there's no turning back." "I'm not turning back." She didn't smile, but she looked satisfied. "Then let's get started." I handed her the folder with my real signature, documents comparing years of transactions, and a printed log from Logan's system. Each piece of paper was another betrayal, but also another weapon. They thought I'd never fight back. They forgot I worked in risk management. By the time I walked out of the station, it was nearly midnight. My phone had 42 missed calls and 17 voicemails. The last message read, "You're tearing this family apart. Brielle's crying nonstop. What happened to you?" I deleted it. Then I texted Logan, "Step 2 starts tomorrow." The next morning, I returned to the house, not to talk, not to explain, but to let them look me in the eye while the floor fell out from under them. Brielle answered the door in a silk robe, coffee in hand, like a suburban goddess. Her smile froze when she saw me. "You're not supposed to be here." "I'm not here to fight," I said. "Just wanted to let you all know. I closed everything. All accounts. All lines of credit. The emergency fund. The joint accounts. The ones you drained." She blinked. "You're being dramatic." Dad appeared behind her, still in pajama pants, phone clutched in his hand like a lifeline. "Aubrey, listen. There's been a misunderstanding. Mom came last, makeup half done, as if preparing for another performance. We never meant to hurt you," she said quickly. It was just temporary help. You've always said family should support each other. I said that while supporting everyone but myself. I stepped inside. They didn't stop me. Do you know what happens when co-signers are removed from fraudulent loans? I asked, pulling out a printed form. The bank investigates. If they find forgery, they prosecute. If they find stolen identity, they escalate. Guess what they're doing now? Dad paled. You wouldn't. I already did. Brielle's voice rose. You're ruining my life. Im reclaiming mine. Mom reached for my hand. We're your parents. We raised you. I pulled away. You raised a provider, not a daughter. Brielle laughed bitterly. You've always hated that they love me more. No, I said calmly. I hated that you thought love meant never facing consequences. Outside, Logan waited in the car, papers spread across the dashboard. He was assembling the final report for the prosecutor. Inside, I dropped the last printed file onto their coffee table. A log of every withdrawal, every forged document, every abuse of trust spanning 8 years. Keep it, I said. You'll need it when the detectives show up. You're bluffing, Mom whispered. Am I? I walked out, closing the door behind me. The silence didn't feel empty this time. It felt earned. Back at Logan's, we printed copies, scanned everything, and uploaded the files to a secure cloud folder labeled Operation Full. By noon, I was sitting across from Detective Sloan again. This is more than enough, she said, flipping through the forged loan applications. You're listed as a guarantor on their home refinance. That's state-level fraud. And these signatures, this is textbook identity theft. She leaned back in her chair. We'll need official charges filed with the DA. I'll handle that. But you'll need to prepare for blowback. Families like this don't go down quietly. I'm ready. Just as I stood to leave, my phone rang. Justin, my boss. Hey, sorry to call during the day, he said, but your sister applied for a job here and used you as a reference. I closed my eyes. Did she lie on the application? She claimed a finance degree and 4 years' experience at a firm you supposedly worked with. I laughed dry and sharp. She dropped out of community college after 1 semester. That's what I figured, but I needed confirmation. She's also applied to 3 competitor firms, all with you listed as her supervisor. Report it, I said. Everywhere. I already did. After the call, I slumped onto Logan's couch, my brain spinning. I had walked away from my family financially, but now they were unraveling legally, professionally, socially. And still, they kept reaching, grabbing, pulling, like drowning people who would rather drag me down than learn to swim. That evening, Helen arrived with a bottle of wine and news from the courthouse. They're trying to refinance again, she said, dropping new papers on the table. Using your name. Again. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I picked up my phone. It's time, I told Detective Sloan. File everything. 3 days after the charges were filed, I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment at the edge of downtown Asheville. It was small, old, and the kitchen tiles made a weird, squeaking sound, but it was mine. No names on the lease, but mine. No shared mailbox. No keys handed to anyone else. Logan helped carry the boxes. Helen brought me a plant. It already looked better than anything I'd grown up with. You really doing this? Helen asked as we unpacked. Cutting them off for good. I nodded. They don't get to come back this time. Not after this. Outside, the sky was pale blue and silent, but my phone kept buzzing. Mom had called 8 times this morning. Brielle had texted me a picture of Dad in a hospital bed with the caption, his blood pressure spiked. Are you happy now? Helen read over my shoulder. Don't respond. But what if he's really... No. Logan cut in from the kitchen. That's what they want. You to doubt. You to fold. Every time. I sat at the table, staring at my laptop. Bills. Legal notices. email threads from Detective Sloan. My entire life had become a courtroom file. Then came the knock. Helen opened the door to find Detective Sloan holding a sealed envelope. "They're being served," she said. "Bank has frozen the accounts. Foreclosure proceedings have started. They're losing the house." I swallowed. The same house they told me would never be mine because Brielle needed a place to raise kids someday. That house. She nodded. Helen handed me a glass of wine. "To poetic justice," she said, raising her glass. The next morning, I got another call from Justin. "The board saw how you handled everything," he said. "They were impressed. We're offering you a promotion. Senior risk analyst." I blinked. "What?" "You caught a major fraud case, handled it calmly, protected your assets. If you did this with your own family, we trust you'll do it for the company." I hung up and just sat in the quiet. My life, slowly, painfully, was rebuilding itself. But the messages kept coming. "Mom, your father has nowhere to go when we lose the house." "Brielle, if Dad dies, it's on you." "Aunt Lydia, you can't jail your own parents. What happened to you?" Logan finally grabbed my phone and muted the entire contact list. "They're falling apart," he said. "And instead of taking responsibility, they're trying to pin it all on you." I stared at the wall for a long time. They spent their whole lives making me the responsible one. And now? Helen asked gently, "Now I'm the free one." That evening, we stood on my tiny balcony watching the sun bleed over the Blue Ridge Mountains. Helen scrolled Zillow listings on her tablet. "There's a place I want to show you. Bigger, brighter, and this time we'll put it in your name first." I laughed for the first time in days. The old me would have hesitated, worried about being too selfish, too fast, too cold. But the woman I was becoming? She smiled and said, "Show me." The courtroom smelled like dust and old air conditioning. It was colder than I expected, brighter too. The kind of sterile, unfeeling light that left nowhere to hide. They brought my parents in first. Margot in a gray blazer, clutching a tissue she didn't use. Raymond in a suit that didn't quite fit anymore. He looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was just seeing clearly for the first time. Brielle sat behind them in the gallery, arms folded, lip trembling, but not from guilt. Just rage. "Court is now in session," the bailiff said. The judge looked over his glasses. "We are here for the sentencing of Margot and Raymond Callahan, both charged with multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and financial abuse. The defendants have requested to enter a guilty plea." Brielle gasped. "What?" Margot turned around and gave her daughter a look that almost made me feel something, until I remembered every forged signature, every withdrawal, every lie they told me to my face. "Very well," the judge said. "Before sentencing, we will hear the victim's statement. Ms. Callahan." My heels clicked against the marble floor. The letter in my hands shook just enough to betray that yes, I was still human. But my voice was steel. "Your Honor," I began, "what was taken from me isn't just financial. It's years of peace, trust, self-worth. They used my name like a credit card they never intended to pay off. My future became their emergency fund." Behind me, I could hear someone sniffle, but I didn't stop. They told me family meant sacrifice. They told me love meant giving without asking. And every time I asked for something back, they reminded me I was the strong one, the reliable one, the responsible one. I turned to look at them, but now I'm done. Margot whispered, "Aubrey, please, we're still your parents." "No," I said calmly. "You're just people who happened to raise me. You're not my family. Families don't steal from each other." The judge cleared his throat. "Thank you, Ms. Callahan." He shuffled some papers. Given the scale and duration of the crimes and the defendant's voluntary guilty plea, the court sentences both Margot and Raymond Callahan to 6 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 3. Restitution of $280,000 is required in full. Margot started to cry, finally. Raymond didn't look at me. He just stared at the floor. And as for Brielle Callahan, the judge continued, glancing down, you will stand trial separately next week for identity theft, employment fraud, and falsification of education records. No, Brielle shrieked. This is her fault. She's destroying our family. I didn't move. I'm just letting gravity do its job. Outside the courtroom, the sun was glaring. Reporters lined the steps. Someone shoved a mic in my face. How does it feel to send your parents to prison? I looked straight at the camera. They sent themselves. I just stopped covering for them. Then I turned and walked down those courthouse steps, not once looking back. Not even when Brielle screamed, "You're dead to me." Funny, I'd never felt more alive. The key clicked in the door of my new home like the final line in a symphony. It was small, sunlit, and quiet. The hardwood floors still smelled like varnish. The kitchen counters gleamed. No one had ever stolen from me here. No one ever would. Logan carried in the last box and dropped it on the counter. You sure you want to do this on your own? I nodded. For once, I want to hear my own thoughts echo off my own walls. He smiled but didn't push. Helen arrived 5 minutes later with champagne, a plant I couldn't name, and a gift bag full of dish towels that said things like, "No drama, just dinner." This place, she said, spinning slowly in the foyer, is peace. We toasted in the kitchen. The light through the window landed on my face like a blessing. That's when the doorbell rang. Detective Sloan stood outside, a manila folder in hand. "Sorry to interrupt moving day," she said, "but I thought you'd want to see this." She handed me the folder. Inside was the court's final notice. My parents' appeal had been denied. "They tried to claim you gave permission for everything," she said with a dry smile. "Didn't hold up." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was finally over. Almost. 2 days later, I received an email from their lawyer. "Your parents are willing to take a plea deal if you agree to write a letter asking for a lighter sentence." I didn't even hesitate. I sat down at my new kitchen table, pulled out my laptop and typed, "Dear Judge Hamilton, I will not be writing any letter in support of my parents. What they did wasn't a mistake. It was a series of deliberate choices made over years. Choices to steal, to lie, to manipulate. The only thing they regret is getting caught. I will, however, be submitting a victim statement detailing every forged document, every stolen dollar, and every way they tried to ruin my name when I finally said no. They chose this path. I choose to live without them. Aubrey Callahan, I hit send. And just like that, the guilt that had followed me like a ghost was gone. Later that evening, Helen and Logan helped me hang art on the bare walls. Simple things. A print of the Blue Ridge Mountains. A framed quote that said, "No is a complete sentence." That's when Logan's phone buzzed. "Local news just posted the update," he said, turning the screen toward me. "Brielle sentenced to 4 years. Identity theft. Employment fraud. Loan application tampering." Helen raised her glass again. "To karma." I smiled. "To silence." Then a final text. Unknown number. I didn't need to open it to know who it was, but I did anyway. "We have nowhere to go when we get out. Please, one more chance." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "You had 31 years of chances. I only just got one. I'm keeping it." Then I blocked the number. Outside, the sky over Asheville turned the color of clean slate. Pale blue and wide open. Logan tapped his glass against mine, ready to start over. I looked around at the walls I'd chosen, the life I was building, the people who stayed, not because they needed something, but because they cared. "More than ready," I said. They paged me just as I was wrapping up a consultation. "Dr. Graves, please report to the ER intake. Your husband's been brought in with a child." I froze. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. My husband, Daniel, with a child? I didn't move. I just stared at the nurse, waiting for her to correct herself, to tell me she meant something else. But she didn't. Her eyes stayed fixed on mine, wide with alarm. They were both unconscious when the ambulance arrived. Car accident. A bystander said the child kept calling him Dad. I don't remember leaving the room. I don't remember walking down the hallway or how I got into the elevator. But I remember the sound of my own heartbeat, like a war drum in my ears. I was a trauma surgeon. I'd seen people in pieces. I'd cut open bodies and stitched lives back together. But nothing prepared me for this, for the idea that my husband might have a child I didn't know about. That morning, everything had felt off. Daniel had kissed me on the forehead, told me he was heading to a job site early, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. His tie was crooked, and his fingers fidgeted with his car keys like a teenager caught in a lie. "See you tonight," he'd said, and I'd called after him, "Daniel, are you okay?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, everything's fine. Don't worry about me." But I did. I had been for weeks. Daniel had grown distant lately. Subtle things, really. His phone always face down. His cologne smelled unfamiliar. Once or twice, I thought I caught the scent of baby wipes in the car, but brushed it off as stress-induced imagination. We had no children, not for lack of trying. 8 years of IVF, hormone treatments, late nights with ice packs pressed to my lower abdomen, and early mornings watching test lines stubbornly remain blank. 8 years of grief. And Daniel had been by my side through all of it, or so I thought. Now, as I raced through the hospital corridor, my heels clicking against the linoleum, that entire version of our life flickered in and out like a dying light bulb. Maybe it had all been pretend, or maybe the truth had just found a new place to hide. When I entered the ER, I expected chaos. Instead, it was quiet, eerily so. A nurse guided me into a small consult room. Inside, the chief of surgery was waiting. His expression told me everything. "Dr. Graves," he said gently, "you might want to sit down." I didn't. Bad news feels more bearable when you're on your feet. There was a crash about 30 minutes ago. Your husband, Daniel Graves, was driving. He's stable, concussion, a few broken ribs, but he'll recover. I exhaled, just once, like collapsing into myself. But the chief hesitated. He wasn't alone. A 7-year-old boy was with him. Multiple eyewitnesses say the child called him Dad. My mouth opened, but no words came out. I could hear a clock ticking. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped. Everything else just stopped. "That can't be," I whispered. "That's impossible. We don't have children. We can't have children." The chief gave a sympathetic nod. "The boy is in pediatric ICU. Head injury, but the prognosis is good. He'll wake up soon. Daniel's asking to speak with you. Urgently." I stood there, frozen. A child, a son, a life I knew nothing about, sitting just one floor away from me. I had walked into this hospital a surgeon, a wife, a woman who thought she knew her life. But the woman who stood in that room now, she had no idea who she really was anymore. The hallway to Daniel's room felt like it stretched on forever. I walked past nurses who greeted me with tight, sympathetic smiles, past colleagues who averted their eyes as if my world hadn't just cracked open underfoot. I didn't smile back. I couldn't. My thoughts were loud, tangled, circling like birds around a carcass. A child, 7 years old, calling my husband Dad. I pressed my palm to my chest, hoping the pressure would stop the ache. It didn't. Daniel was in a private room at the end of the hall. Through the glass, I saw him lying back on the bed, for in his arm, bruises darkening along his cheekbone and temple. But he was awake, and when he saw me step inside, something shifted in his eyes, relief and fear all at once. "Allison," he whispered, trying to sit up. I raised a hand. "Don't," I said quietly. "Just don't move." I sat in the chair beside his bed, but I didn't take his hand. I couldn't trust what it had held. For a long moment, we didn't speak. The silence was heavy, filled with things neither of us wanted to say first. Finally, he looked at me and his voice cracked. "I'm sorry." 2 words, too late. I folded my arms across my chest, felt the sting at the corners of my eyes, but blinked it away. "Who is he?" My voice came out flat, surgical. "His name is Ethan," Daniel said, his throat working like it physically hurt to speak. He's my son." The word hit me like a slap. I flinched. "How long have you known?" I asked. "About a year," he said. But he paused, closing his eyes. "It didn't start out that way. I didn't know he existed until Rachel's mom called me." Rachel. The name rang a bell, faint, distant. She had worked with Daniel on a project 8 years ago. I remembered her vaguely. Brown hair, easy laugh, always offering to stay late. "Rachel," I repeated slowly. "As in Rachel Carter." Daniel nodded. "After your 3rd IVF cycle failed," he said softly, "you threw yourself into work. You barely came home. We barely talked. I felt like I was watching you disappear. And so you slept with someone else," I finished for him. It wasn't a question. I was broken, Allison. "So were you," he said. "I'm not excusing it. I swear to God I'm not. But it happened. It was stupid and selfish, and I regretted it the second it ended. It was only 3 months. And then Rachel left. She told me she didn't want anything from me, that she was moving away. So you just moved on? Never checked? Never wondered if she kept the baby?" I could hear my own voice rising. I didn't care. While I was blaming myself, going through surgeries and hormone shots and soul-crushing disappointment, you had a child growing up somewhere and you never said a word. "I didn't know," Daniel insisted. "I swear to you I didn't. Not until last year when her mother called. Rachel's dying, Allison. Cancer. Stage 4. She said Ethan needed to know who his father was before it was too late." I stared at the wall, trying to absorb it. Ethan. A boy with Daniel's eyes and God knows what else. A child who had existed while I was convincing myself that I was broken, that I had failed. "So what now?" I asked. "You've been seeing him behind my back." "Every weekend," Daniel admitted, shame coloring his voice. "Buying groceries for them, paying for his school supplies, spending time with him. I told him I was just a family friend. I didn't know how to tell you." I pressed a hand to my forehead. "You lied to both of us." "I know," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "And I'm sorry. I just didn't want to lose you." I stood up slowly, trying to breathe through the chaos spiraling inside me. I couldn't look at him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "I need air," I said, and walked out before he could stop me. And for the first time in our 15-year marriage, I didn't know if I was walking away or beginning to wake up. I didn't go home. I couldn't. I found myself walking the hospital corridors, turning corners out of muscle memory, ending up outside the pediatric ICU. The door was marked with a hand-painted sign. "Please knock gently, tiny hearts healing inside." I knocked. A nurse I recognized from rounds let me in, her eyes softening when she saw me. "Room 6, she whispered. "He's stable. Still sleeping, but he should wake soon." The room was filled with the faint beeping of machines, the sterile scent of antiseptic mixed with something warmer, like crayons and clean laundry. And there he was, Ethan, 7 years old, a small 4 in his arm, a bandage wrapped gently around his forehead. His dark curls were tousled across the pillow, and his cheeks still flushed from whatever trauma his little body had been through. But he was breathing steadily, peacefully, and he looked like Daniel. Not vaguely, not distantly. The same nose, the same chin, the same small crease above his right eyebrow that formed even in sleep. My knees went weak, and I sat down before I collapsed. I didn't know what I expected to feel. Rage? Jealousy? Grief? I had felt all those things in the last 3 hours. But now, sitting there with this boy barely an arm's length away, all I felt was hollow. Like the wind had blown through my life and left everything rearranged. On the table, next to his bed, There was a piece of paper and a box of crayons. A drawing. I picked it up with trembling fingers. It was simple, childlike, but instantly recognizable. A red-roofed house, a sun with long yellow rays, and 3 figures holding hands. A tall man, a little boy, and a woman in a white coat with long hair. Underneath, in crooked handwriting, it said, "My family. For Daddy." My breath hitched. That woman in the white coat, that was me. I sat in stunned silence until I heard a small, raspy voice. "Hi," I turned. Ethan's eyes were open, large, round, and startlingly dark. He blinked up at me, uncertain but not afraid. "Are you the doctor?" I swallowed. "Yes, I'm Dr. Graves." He looked at me for a long moment. "You're nice. You look like the lady in my picture." I tried to smile, but it didn't come out right. "You drew this." He nodded proudly. "Daddy said he has a wife who helps sick people. He says she's really smart and kind. I thought maybe that could be you." My throat closed. "Maybe it is." Ethan tilted his head. "Do you know my daddy?" "I do." I folded the paper back into its little square, hands still shaking. "I know him very well." He relaxed against the pillow, blinking sleepily. "Daddy tells me about you a lot. He says sometimes you're sad because you want a kid, but your tummy won't make one." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I think that's really sad." Tears burned behind my eyes. I didn't correct him. I didn't explain biology or boundaries or betrayal. I just said, "Yeah, it is." Ethan smiled a little. "I think you'd be a good mom, though. You have kind eyes." My heart twisted. This child, this beautiful, honest little soul. He didn't know who I was. Not really. He didn't know what I had lost, what I had fought for, what I had been denied. He didn't know that I was the wife of the man who had fathered him in silence. And yet he looked at me like I was someone safe. I reached out, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. He didn't flinch. "You should rest now," I said softly. "You've been through a lot." Ethan closed his eyes again, but whispered just before slipping into sleep, "Will you come back?" I didn't answer right away. I waited until I was sure my voice wouldn't crack. "I will." And I meant it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the staff lounge, still in my scrubs, Ethan's drawing folded carefully in my lap. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and somewhere down the hall, someone laughed, probably a nurse catching a break between shifts. But all I could hear were Ethan's words echoing in my head. "I think you'd be a good mom. You have kind eyes." What kind of world lets a child like that believe in someone like me? I stared at the crayon-drawn figures. The family I never thought I'd have, drawn by the child I never knew existed, the child of my husband and another woman. At 6:30 a.m., I finally left the hospital and drove through the foggy streets of Charleston to the only person I could talk to, Emily Price, my best friend since med school. She opened her apartment door still in pajamas, a coffee mug in hand. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Oh God, what happened?" "I need to talk," I said, my voice hoarse. 10 minutes later, we were on her couch, her dog snoring at our feet, and I was telling her everything. The crash, the child, the drawing, the confession. Emily didn't interrupt. Not once. She just sat there, sipping her coffee, her brows furrowed deeper with each word. When I finally stopped, she set her mug down carefully. "Allison," she said slowly, "please tell me you're not thinking about staying with him." I rubbed my temples. "I don't know." "You should," she said firmly. "This is betrayal. This is deceit. For a year, he let you believe everything was normal while he played dad on the weekends. Do you have any idea what that does to someone?" "I do," I whispered. "I'm living it." Emily leaned forward. "And the kid? What are you going to do? Pretend he's not part of this?" "I don't want to pretend," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "I met him, Emily. I sat by his bed. I talked to him. He's kind. He's smart. He's 7. And he's already lost his mother, and now Now he might lose everything else, too. Emily sighed long and slow. You're too compassionate for your own good. That boy is not your responsibility. He isn't, I agreed. But he didn't ask for any of this. He didn't choose to be born into a lie. She gave me a long look. You're starting to care about him. I nodded. I already do. Emily shook her head, exasperated. You're grieving, Allison. This isn't love. It's trauma bonding. Maybe, I said. Or maybe it's clarity. That afternoon, I drove to North Charleston, to the old apartment where Ethan and his grandmother lived. I needed to see it. I needed to understand what kind of life he came from and whether there was a place for me in it. The building was tired, peeling paint, rusted railings, but clean. A little girl on the third floor waved at me as I climbed the stairs. When I knocked on the door, it opened slowly to reveal a frail woman with kind eyes, leaning on a cane. Mrs. Carter? I asked. She blinked, surprised. Yes. I'm Allison, Daniel's wife. Her hand flew to her chest. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry to come unannounced, I said. I just needed to see. She opened the door wider. Then come in. You should see where your husband's son has been growing up. The apartment was small but warm. Handmade curtains, family photos, books stacked neatly on shelves. It smelled like lemon cleaner and sugar cookies. There were drawings on the fridge, pirates, dragons, a big red heart with the word Daddy written across it. Mrs. Carter watched me look. He's a good boy, she said quietly. He misses his mother, but he's still smiling. I closed my eyes. He thinks I'm the woman from his drawings. Maybe you are. I turned to her. I don't know what I'm doing. She smiled sadly. None of us do. We just try to do right by the children. And that's when I realized I wasn't here to confirm what I already knew. I was here to ask myself what I was willing to become. Mrs. Carter led me into a small living room that doubled as a dining space. The furniture was worn but spotless, and the windows let in the soft afternoon light. On the wall, framed photos of a young woman. Rachel smiled back at me. She looked kind, delicate. There was one photo of her cradling a newborn baby, her eyes glassy with exhaustion but glowing with love. I couldn't look at it for long. She was stubborn, Mrs. Carter said, her voice warm with memory, even as a little girl. Wouldn't take help unless she absolutely had to. When she found out she was pregnant, she told me she'd handle it on her own. Said Daniel had a life, a wife, and she wasn't going to interfere. I listened in silence, unsure whether to feel admiration or fury. She raised Ethan herself, Mrs. Carter continued. I helped as much as I could, but we never told the boy who his father was. Rachel said he'd figure out someday, or maybe he'd never need to. Her voice broke a little, but when the cancer got bad, when we knew time was short, she changed her mind. Said Ethan deserved the truth, even if it was messy. I looked down at my hands, folded tightly in my lap. Daniel told me she asked him to step in. She did. He came the same week we called. She smiled softly. He looked shell-shocked, seeing Ethan for the first time, like he'd just stepped into a life he forgot he was part of. I nodded slowly. I could picture that. Daniel, standing awkwardly in a doorway, seeing a miniature version of himself and realizing what he had lost, or maybe what he had been too afraid to face. She made him promise to stay in Ethan's life, Mrs. Carter added, and he has, every weekend. Grocery runs, school meetings, bedtime stories. He doesn't call him Dad yet, but her eyes glistened. He knows. Ethan's laughter suddenly rang out from the back room, light and bright, and something in me cracked. I followed the sound and found him sitting at a tiny desk, coloring furiously. When he looked up and saw me, his face lit up. You came. I smiled, trying to steady my voice. Of course I did. You feeling better today? He nodded, then turned the drawing toward me. Look, it's us. The picture showed 4 stick figures this time, One tall man, one small boy, one older woman with a cane, and one woman in a white coat. All holding hands, all smiling. That's Daddy and Grandma. And you and me, he said, pointing at each. I drew our future. I crouched beside him. You think that's how it's going to be? I hope so, he said shyly. Daddy always talks about you. Says you're the bravest person he knows. He said you make people better. I swallowed hard. That's my job. He said, maybe you'd make our family better too. I closed my eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by how simple it all seemed in his mind. There were no complications in Ethan's world, just drawings and stories and love, even if it came from broken places. Ethan, I said gently, what would it mean to you if I became your mom? His eyes widened, then sparkled. You mean for real? I nodded. He threw his arms around my neck so fast it knocked the air out of me. I promise I'll be a really good son, he whispered into my hair. You won't regret it. Tears welled up in my eyes as I held him close. His body was small, warm, full of trust one didn't deserve, but desperately wanted to earn. From the doorway, Mrs. Carter watched us silently, her hands pressed to her mouth. When I met her gaze, she nodded as if to say, it's okay. He's yours now, too. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if motherhood wasn't something I had to create, but something I had to accept. Later that evening, I drove back to the hospital to check on Daniel. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I needed answers. Maybe I just needed to see if he was still the same man who used to fall asleep beside me, reading medical journals and whispering ideas for baby names we never got to use. His room was dim when I walked in, and he was sitting up, changed into a t-shirt and sweatpants, folding his discharge papers slowly, like they weighed 1,000 pounds. He looked up when I entered. You went to see him. I nodded. He swallowed. And I'm here. He looked down at his hands. Allison, I don't deserve forgiveness. I know that. What I did, what I kept from you, was cowardly. I was afraid I'd lose you. You already had, I said quietly, sitting down across from him. The second you chose silence over truth. Daniel closed his eyes. I never meant to replace what we lost. I leaned forward. You didn't, but you built something new without telling me. That's not just betrayal, Daniel. That's a life you chose to live without me in it. He looked shattered. So what now? I hesitated. The silence stretched between us like a thread I wasn't sure I wanted to snap. Ethan's a wonderful child, I said. He's sweet and smart and so open it hurts. Daniel's face softened. He is. I care about him, I continued, feeling the weight of every word. But I don't know what that means yet. I don't know what that makes me. Daniel nodded. You don't owe him anything. Or me. I know, I said, but that's not why I'm here. He looked at me, puzzled. I'm here because he asked me something today, I said, and I didn't know how to answer. Daniel's breath caught. What did he ask? I met his gaze. He asked if I could be his mom. The words lingered in the air like smoke. Daniel blinked, and something inside him broke wide open. What did you say? I said I didn't know, I admitted. I didn't want to lie. He closed his eyes again, lips trembling. I never told him about us, about who you are. I told him I knew someone incredible. I told him about the woman who never gave up on people, even when they broke her heart. I bit down hard, forcing back the sting behind my eyes. He's already lost his mother, Daniel whispered. I couldn't let him lose the idea of you two. I stood. This isn't about me being an idea, Daniel. It's about whether I can be a real person in his life. Someone who shows up. Someone who stays. Can you? He asked, almost afraid to hope. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but I want to try. For him. Daniel nodded slowly. Then I'll support you, however you need me to. Before I left, I stopped by the pediatric wing one more time. Ethan was sitting up in bed, drawing again, his face lighting up the moment he saw me. "You came back." "I told you I would." He patted the bed beside him. I sat. He glanced at the nurse, then leaned in and whispered, "Did you think about it?" "About what?" I asked, even though I already knew. "About being my mom," he said. "I mean, not just in the picture. For real." I took a breath, then reached for his hand. "Ethan, being a mom is a big thing. It means showing up every day, even when it's hard, even when I mess up." He nodded solemnly. "I can help you. I'm good at things." I smiled through a blur of tears. "I'm sure you are." "So, is that a yes?" he asked, his voice so small I almost missed it. I squeezed his hand. "It's a maybe, but it's a real maybe. The kind that could turn into a forever." He beamed like the sun had risen just for him. And maybe in some small way it had. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, the sunlight slanting across my coffee, untouched and growing cold. In front of me was a yellow legal pad filled with scribbled lists. Reasons to stay, reasons to walk away, what Ethan needs, what I can handle. None of the lists gave me peace. Every time I tried to calculate a way forward, it brought me right back to the same impossible place, the space between what I wanted and what I feared. I knew I could love that child. I already did in some small, fragile way. But could I raise him while living in the shadow of the betrayal that brought him into the world? Could I walk into the room every morning and see the eyes of the woman my husband never meant to love, but still created life with? I drove back to the hospital before visiting hours officially started. Daniel was already dressed, standing by the window, a small overnight bag slung over his shoulder. When I walked in, he turned slowly, like he'd been hoping I'd come, but didn't quite believe I would. "Allison," he said, his voice cautious. "I need to talk to you," I said. "And I need you to listen." He nodded, set his bag down. I took a breath. I've decided to be Ethan's guardian. I'm going to be in his life. Fully. His shoulders dropped in relief, eyes glinting with disbelief. "You're serious?" "I'm serious." He took a step toward me, but I held up a hand. "But I'm not doing it for you, Daniel. I'm doing it for him. And there are conditions." He froze, waiting. "First," I said, "there will be no more lies, no more secrets. You tell me everything. If there's anything else, any part of your past that could hurt this child or me, I want it out in the open now." "There's nothing else," he said immediately. "I swear." "Second," I continued, "we're not pretending we're okay. You and I have a lot to repair. This isn't a clean slate. This is a rebuild from the rubble." He nodded slowly. "I understand. I want to rebuild it. With you." "And third," I added, "we make Ethan the priority. Not our guilt, not our shame. Him." Daniel's voice cracked. "He's already everything to me." I looked down, tears stinging again. "He asked me to be his mom last night." Daniel pressed a hand to his mouth, overwhelmed. "He said he'd try hard to be a good son," I whispered, as if he needed to earn it. Daniel shook his head, voice breaking. "He doesn't. He's already perfect." I nodded. "Then let's give him the family he's been drawing for years." We didn't hug. Not yet. There were still too many cracks between us. But something shifted, some invisible thread readying itself. Not tightly, not completely, but enough. That evening, we drove together to Ethan's apartment. Mrs. Carter opened the door, surprised to see us both. "I suppose today's the day," she said, already misty-eyed. Ethan ran down the hallway, feet slapping against the laminate floor, and threw himself into Daniel's arms. "You're okay." "I am," Daniel said, hugging him tightly. "And I have some news." Ethan looked at me, wide-eyed. "Is it?" I crouched down in front of him. "Ethan, how would you feel about coming home with us?" His hands flew to his mouth, and then he launched into my arms like a rocket. "Yes, yes, yes." Mrs. Carter wiped her eyes. "You've made him the happiest boy in the world." I held Ethan tight, my arms trembling. "No, he did that for me first." And just like that, what had started in silence and shame began to turn into something else entirely. Something fragile, yes, but something worth saving. 3 weeks later, the guest room in our house had become Ethan's room. It still smelled faintly of paint and new carpet, and the walls were now covered in planets, spaceships, and dozens of his drawings, some new, some carefully preserved from his grandmother's fridge. One of them showed the four of us again, but this time there was something different. A dog. We didn't have one. Yet, I stood in the doorway one morning, watching him hum to himself while lining up his toy dinosaurs in what looked like a careful battle formation. He wore the Star Wars pajamas I'd bought him on impulse. Too big, but he didn't care. He saw me and grinned. "Mom, look, the T-Rex is winning." I froze. It was the first time he'd said it. The word. He didn't even notice. He just kept narrating the battle, waving the toy like it had always been mine to see. I stepped into the room, slowly, kneeling beside him. "Say that again." He blinked. "What? What did you just call me?" He smiled. "Mom." It was soft, natural, like it had always been that way. I swallowed. "Do you want to call me that?" He shrugged. "Yeah, you make pancakes better than Dad, and you smell like shampoo and hugs." That night, I cried in the laundry room. Ugly cried, not because I was sad, but because I finally understood that love doesn't always arrive the way you planned. Sometimes it sneaks in through the side door wearing pajamas 2 sizes too big and holding a toy dinosaur. Daniel had been keeping his distance, like he promised. He slept in the downstairs den, worked late, and only entered my space when invited. It was strange and quiet and respectful, like co-parenting with a ghost. One night, after Ethan had gone to sleep, I found him outside on the porch, staring at the stars. I handed him a cup of tea and sat beside him. "I didn't think you'd stay," he said softly. "I didn't think I would either," I admitted. Silence settled between us, but it wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. "He calls you Mom now," Daniel said, smiling faintly. "I know. He's happy." "So am I," I whispered. He turned to look at me, and us. I looked up at the night sky, the same one Ethan had drawn 100 times. We're something new. Not what we were. Not yet what we'll be. Daniel nodded slowly. "That's fair." We didn't need to define it yet. What mattered was that we were both still here, showing up for the same little boy, and maybe someday for each other. The following week, Ethan brought home a school assignment, Draw Your Family. He handed it to me with the proudest smile I'd ever seen. The picture had 3 people and 1 dog again. Me, Daniel, Ethan, and a golden retriever. "You put the dog in again," I said, smiling. He grinned. "Because I know we'll get one. I just haven't picked his name yet." "Shouldn't we wait until we actually have the dog?" I teased. "Nope," he said confidently. "Some families come from hope before they come from truth." And somehow, that 7-year-old knew exactly what my heart had taken months to understand. We weren't perfect. We were healing. We were stitched together from betrayal and forgiveness, truth and tenderness. We were a family,